Okay, we're now going to
Thank you,
begin. We're now going to begin our class on the sources for Kashrut law and the procedures. So the first one we're going to discuss is koshering utensils. So this could be found in the book of Numbers, which is also, the book of Numbers is what the Christians gave the name to the book. It's called Bamidbar, in the desert. So the actual law for koshering utensils, we studied that in last week's Torah portion, where the Jews went to war against the Midianites, and they captured their animals, their people, and also whatever other spoils they got from the war. And it says, Adam, this is on page 907, Parshas Matos, and it talks about, it says actually, line 22, only the gold and the silver, the copper, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that comes into the fire, you shall pass through the fire, and it will be purified. This is referring to all of the cooking utensils that they captured from the Midianites. And to kosher them, they had to be put through the fires. We discussed that about the anything was used to make non-kosher food, you make it kosher by putting it through fire. And then it says later, and everything that fire, and it will be purified, but it must be purified with the water of sprinkling, and everything that would not come in the fire, you shall pass through the water. Passing through the water, this refers to utensils that have never been used before. Like you buy something straight from the store and you go directly to the mikvah and you kosher them unless they were made by an Israeli company and you didn't have to. So the Rashi commentary here says, this passage refers to the methods by which the utensils and garments taken in the Midianite war could be made usable by their new Jewish owners. By extension, the same laws apply to any utensils acquired from non-Jews. If such vessels have no problem other than ritual contamination, immersion in a mikvah would be sufficient. So that's where we get the laws about how we kosher our utensils, and it's pretty clear what goes. And then later on in the written Torah, it discusses what can and cannot be kosher, but basically that's the source for that. Okay, the next topic we're going to discuss is the prohibition against eating blood. Now, this is mentioned in several different sections, and the first one that is mentioned in is the Parsha Re'eh. Re'eh is in Deuteronomy, and that is chapter 12, numbers 23 to 24. And that, for those of you following along in your book, is page 1005 in the Art Scroll Chumash. I just said Chumash, I'm speaking modern Hebrew. Okay, so paragraph 12, lines 23 to 24. Only be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood, it is the life, and you shall not eat the life with the meat. You shall not eat it. You shall pour it on the ground. You shall not eat it, in order that it be well with you and your children after you, when you do what is right in the eyes of Hashem. So right then and there, it tells you not to eat the blood, and it also tells you why not to eat the blood, that it is that contains life, and we do not want to do that. And the prohibition against blood is written in several other places. The first one I read to you was Re'eh, which is all Parshas Deuteronomy, which is what we call Devarim. We just finished that this week. The second place it's mentioned is in the Parsha of Acharei Mot, which is after the death of Acharei, means after, Mot means death. My wife recalls that when she was in Sunday school, they were learning Acharei Mot, and she thought it was the archery moth. So I don't know where that comes from. Anyway, so what it says here in the in that parsha, it says, I shall concentrate my attention upon the soul consuming the blood, and I will cut it off from the midst of his people. For once again it says, for the soul of the flesh is in the blood, and I have assigned it for you upon the altar to provide atonement for your souls. It is the blood that atones for the soul. That's talking about making the sacrifices, which we'll get into later. But what Rashi's comment is interesting. It says, when they say any blood, they're saying that although this is directly from Rashi, although the next verse seems to imply that the subject of the prohibition is only sacrificial blood, the word kol, which means all, is an amplification that includes even blood from unconsecrated animals. So the blood of fowl and kosher species that are not used for the sacrifices, that too is included, that cannot be eaten. And it goes on to mention it a few other places. I actually, two other places, but basically what it says is pretty much the same thing. So the next topic that the said in the Torah are the parameters for keeping kosher. And the first one is in the Parsha Shemini, which is in Leviticus, also known as Vayikra. And this is said chapters, basically it covers quite a bit, quite a few pages. Lines 1 through 46. So it really talks about quite a few things. And it says, line 1, excuse me, God spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying to them, speak to the children of Israel, saying, these are the creatures that you may eat from among all the animals that are upon the earth. So then it goes on to describe what animals we can eat with the split hoof, choose its cud, and then it gets into the animals that we can't eat, the insects and stuff like that. But there's some very, very important spiritual information here that's given by Rashi. Actually, this is a commentary from Rabbi ArtScroll. The Torah stresses the reason for kashrut in very clear and powerful terms. By observing these laws, the Jew can pull himself up the ladder of holiness. By ignoring them, he not only contaminates himself, he gradually builds a barrier that blocks out his comprehension of holiness. Just as someone who is constantly exposed to loud music and harsh noise, slowly and imperceptibly but surely suffers a loss of his ability to hear fine sounds and detect subtle modulations, so too the Torah informs us. A Jew's consumption of non-kosher food deadens his spiritual capacities and denies him the full opportunity to become holy. These are very, very important words. I mentioned this earlier when we started the class. We were talking about the laws of kashrut involve mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are commandments. The root word for mitzvah is tzav. Tzav. Tzav means to connect. By following the commandments, I'm not talking about just the kashrut commandments, but all the commandments, we're doing as God has asked us to do, and that helps us to connect. You think about in the terms of a small child and their parent. a parent sees a kid messed up his room and stuff like that, they'll say, Adam, go clean up your room, please. And Adam cleans up his room. And what does that do? That's connecting to the parent. You're doing what the parent asks you to do, a sincere request, and that causes connection. So and next week, which will probably be the final week of the class unless they come up with something new, we're going to be talking about why keep kosher. And I'm going to go over this again in greater depth. And so we see Adam Shalloway here in the background. He's got, what kind of cereal is that, Adam?
Special K.
Special K. Show us the hexagon on the Special K, Adam. Yes. I can't see it, but I know Adam keeps kosher. So Adam's doing a good thing by eating special K. Yes. Now, the OU. Okay, way to go, Adam. Way to go. Way to go. All right, so that is the parameters for kosher. It's also is mentioned again in Re'eh, which has a lot of good stuff, a lot of stuff about kosher. And it basically, it's from chapter 3 up until chapter 2. It says, you shall not eat any abominations. And when they say abominations, they're talking about the foods that we cannot eat. They call those abominations. Okay. Milk and meat. This is very interesting. It's mentioned 3 times in Mishpatim, Parsha Mishpatim, once again, Kisisa and Re'eh. 3 different places it's mentioned. But unlike all of the other instances where the kosher laws are mentioned more than once, they're not said exactly the same. When it comes to milk and meat, they all say the same thing. Do not seethe a kid in its mother's milk. Very, very simple. Do not cook a kid in a mother's milk. Now, a kid is not a calf. A kid is not a baby chicken. But that was interpreted in the oral law and by the rabbis that it included all meat. And there's a very interesting commentary that it was mentioned 3 times. And it's mentioned 3 times, and the Chachamim, the sages, say that these 3 times refer to 3 things about cooking, about eating milk with meat. It says, number 1, you're not supposed to cook it. Number 2, you're not supposed to consume it. And number 3, you're not supposed to benefit from it. What does that mean, benefit from it? Probably the most obvious thing is that it restricts a Jew who follows, well, it restricts a Jew from owning a restaurant where, or a caterer or something like that, where they serve non-kosher food. Now, Jews who are not observe the laws of kashrut may not find this to be important, but what it's telling you is that if you're a Jew, an observant Jew, you are not supposed to benefit from any foods that mix milk and meat. There are restaurants that refer to themselves as being kosher, and what they do is they sell the restaurant on paper to a non-Jew, and they're open on Shabbat, and they serve the meat, and they serve cheeseburgers and chicken parmesan or whatever that you have. They're serving the non-kosher food, and anyway, that's really not permitted. But if they do it, that's their business. Okay, the next item we talk about is the item of slaughtering. First time we talk about slaughtering, we're going to talk about an animal that dies without being slaughtered. And that first appears in Parsha Re'eh, which is in the book of Devarim, which is Deuteronomy. It's line page 1013, line 21, it says, you shall not eat any carcass. Any carcass. Now, what does that mean, eat a carcass? Carcass is a dead body, also known as, in the parlance of our time, roadkill. So you don't want to go eating any animal, even if you find a cow or a chicken that's been killed or just died of natural causes. You cannot eat that unless it's been slaughtered properly by a kosher shochet, a butcher. We're not supposed to gain any benefit from that forever at all. And it also mentions, I think, 1421, let me see, 1419. Okay. Oh, also too, if you read along Parshas Re'eh, it includes, it says, you shall not eat any carcass, for you are a holy people to Hashem, your God. And it says again, you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. So somehow they associated that with the carcass. The next kosher law is about eating fat. Now, it's not, I figured, when I first read this, I figured, aha, that's why whenever Jews go to a delicatessen, they order corned beef, they extra lean corned beef, so they're not eating any fat. But no, that's not the way it goes. Don't tell it to a New Yorker. If you ever had New York pastrami, that's the best. It's got a lot of fat on it, but that's not exactly what they're talking about. What they're talking about is in Vayikra, Parshas Vayikra, Adam, it's page 555. Vayikra in Leviticus, line 17. An eternal decree for your generations and all your dwelling places, you may not consume any fat or any blood. Now, this is further elucidated on in Parshas Tzav, which is on page 579, lines 23 to 25. It says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, any fat of oxen, sheep, or goats you shall not eat. So it specifies the kosher mammals, the fat from them you shall not eat. The fat of an animal that died and the fat of an animal that had been torn to death may be put to any use, but you shall not eat it. For anyone who eats the fat of animal species from which one may bring a fire offering to Hashem, the soul that eats will be cut off from its people. You should not consume any blood. Again, it says that in any of your dwelling places, whether from fowl or from animals. Any person who consumes any blood, that soul should be cut off. Now, Rashi explains this. It says, Rashi says, the prohibition against consuming fats and blood applies to all sheep, goats, and cattle, whether they are consecrated or not. Although the word chelev, which is fat, is commonly translated as fat, there is no English word that defines it precisely. For in terms of this prohibition, fat means only the fatty tissue that is placed on the altar in the case of offerings. Fat is forbidden only from species that are eligible to be used as offerings, but one may eat the fat of such animals as deer and hart and the other kosher wild animals, and they may not be used for offerings. And the fat is not the kind of fat that you find on a steak or on the skin from chicken. It's the fat around the glands. That's what they're talking to, because around the fat that also sometimes contains blood. And so that's not not good. Okay. Finally, we get to bugs. And bugs, I lied to you before. I read something that said it said not to eat bugs 5 different places. I only found 2, but there was references to them in other places. It didn't say not to eat them, but I guess I counted that as all 5. So once again, back to Re'eh, which contains a lot of the laws of Kashrut, and page 1013, line 19. They shall not be eaten. Every clean and every flying, swarming creature is unclean to you. They shall not be eaten. That's one place. And then the other one is Parshas Shemini. Shemini is in Vayikra, which is Leviticus. And it says there is in line 11:20 to 23, where it says, excuse me, I'm not finding the right one, 11. Hold on. Here we go. Every flying creature that walks on four legs, it is an abomination to you. Only this may you eat from among all flying, teeming creatures. Only this may you eat from among all flying, teeming creatures that walk on four legs. One that has jumping legs above its legs, grasshoppers, praying mantises, with which to spring upon the earth. You may eat these from among them. Every flying, teeming thing that has four legs, it is an abomination to you. So the ones that fly and the ones that jump, excuse me, fly is a bad word to you. The ones that jump, you may eat. However, I have not seen them anywhere in any kosher restaurant, in any kosher grocery store. But someday somebody's going to come up with freeze-dried, chocolate-covered cicadas. And Adam's making a face. But let me tell you something, Adam. You dip your shoelaces in chocolate, they're going to taste good. Or if you put a really good breading around it, it's going to taste good. Rashi has a comment about this. Even though a few species of insects may be eaten, as indicated in the following verses, Rashi states that only firm traditions suffice to permit such consumption because it is impossible to determine which are kosher solely through their physical characteristics. With the passage of time, such traditions have grown virtually extinct. There are some Moroccan and Yemenite Jews who have preserved their ancient traditions regarding the kosher insects. However, Or HaChaim writes that when he was in Morocco, he protested against the consumption of any insects because of the great difficulty in identifying the few kosher species from the vast number of non-kosher species. He further states that although 12 years had passed since they had accepted his rebuke, the land had a locust invasion during that entire period. We just had the 17-year cicadas came back, and I did not see any mashgiach going around capturing them to be consumed at a later time. So that's pretty much the laws from Kashrut, from the Torah. The rabbinical laws are a little bit different. Rabbinical laws take these laws and they expand on them, and sometimes in other ways they make us aware of things that we're not aware of. First question a lot of people have with kashrut is why is chicken included as far as calling it meat? Because usually when we refer to meat, fleshig, most people in their minds are thinking steak, roasts, these type of lamb chops, these type of things. But meat also includes chicken. And the reason the rabbis came up with it, and for a while, people and I don't know exactly when this decision came down, but before the decision came down, I believe there were some people who were eating chicken. The ruling that the rabbis made was as follows. It said chicken can be mistaken for meat. I don't know how that could be unless you really burn it on the barbecue. But chicken can be mistaken for meat in two ways. One of it, it's slaughtered the same way as meat is, and it's salted the same way the meat is. The blood has to be drained. And by the way, fish, the blood does not have to be drained from fish. It's a different thing altogether. So that's why they include chicken in meat, because it's got some similarities in meat. The rabbis came up with a ruling that fish and meat should not be eaten together. Definitely not on the same plate. They could be eaten separately because many Jewish homes have, of course, the fish before they serve like a filter fish before they serve the meat. The reason for this was that eating fish and meat was referred to as a sakana, S-A-K-A-N-A-H. A sakana means danger. At some time, many, many years ago, it was considered dangerous to eat meat and fish together. The reason, don't know, but they did have a reason for it. So in all, I shouldn't say all, in most kosher hashgacha, they stress that if you're going to serve, for example, you have a kiddush on Shabbat, and usually with the kiddush on Shabbat, you may have salads, you may have tuna, they may serve cholent, they may serve delicatessen meat, but what you do is that you separate it. You put one, and let's say you put the fish at one end of the table and the meat at the other end of the table, and you definitely do not bring it, put it on the same plate. And this is just kosher supervision will do this, but it's just it's a common practice to not eat fish together with meat. Another thing the rabbis came down was the concept of mavushal wine versus non-mavushal wine. All credible kosher establishments will only serve mavushal wine. Mavushal means boiled, cooked. Wine has been cooked. The reason it's been cooked is because the Gentiles used to serve wine and use them in idol worship. In certain ceremonies, when they would worship their idols, they would use wine, and their wine was not boiled, was not cooked. The reason the Jews did it was to make us separate. And I told you this once before, the word kedusha, which we all know is meaning holy, it also means separate. Just following the laws of kashrut separates us from the nations, distinguishes us as Jews. So the mavushal wine is wine that has been cooked. The non-mavushal wine is wine that has not been cooked. And you're not going to find that in any strictly certified kosher restaurant, or most Jewish homes will not serve non-mavushal wine. The rabbis also came up with the separating the utensils for milk and meat. In a kosher home, you're going to have at least two sets of dishes, one for meat, one for dairy. You don't want to mix them. The food that's parve, like salads, fish, if it's parve, you can put it on either one of the plates, but you cannot cook it in a kosher, if you cook fish in a meat pan, it's going to become, it'll be meat. Will absorb the meat taste, and the same thing for a milk pan. So the rabbis decided to basically separate everything milk from meat. The parve you could have separate, or as we do in our house, use paper plates. And another thing is that some people, for Passover, some people have, we have separate Passover dishes and silverware and glasses or everything. We don't have milchik and fleishik for Passover. So we don't eat milchik. When we do, we just use paper plates. So the rabbis came up with the separating utensils. And finally, they came up with the concept of bishul akum. Bishul is cooking. Akum is from a Gentile. When you first read and this is this comes down in the oral Torah. And by the way, the oral Torah was just the written. We got the 10 Commandments, which are part of the written Torah, and then the rest of it God taught to Moses, written and oral. But in the oral tradition, they explained the bishul akum, that we are not supposed to eat food that is cooked by a Gentile. So if you just read that one sentence, you're going to say, time out. I just ate at a nice kosher restaurant, and you're going to tell me that the guy from Haiti, who was the line cook, is Jewish. He was cooking my steak. Probably not. But then you have to read on what means cooking. Cooking starts with who turns on the fire. That's part of cooking. If a Jew turns on the fire, you can have an agnostic, you could have a Hindu cook the meat. It doesn't make any difference. Cooking starts with who turns on the fire. So it doesn't make it any more holy or non-holy if the grill man and all the line cooks are Jewish, doesn't matter, as long as a Jew turns on the oven. And that comes from a unusual tradition, is that they, and there's also the concept of the same thing with bread and anything that's cooked in an oven that's baked. It's called Pas Yisrael, cooked by a Jew. That's the oven has to be turned on by a Jew, but it's not necessarily has to be cooked by the Jew. The concern there was that if you've got non-Jews working together in the kitchen with you, there's a chance for you get a, say a guy sees a nice looking lady cooking some bread and asks her out for a date, and she's not Jewish, and they go out on the date. The next thing you know, there's social dancing, and then after that, it inadvertently will come to intermarriage. So that's why the food has got to be turned, the oven has got to be turned on by a non-Jew. So there's a lot more to this than I covered, but I basically covered the basic things. I get into great detail and great depth on all of these issues, but I basically covered the most basics and the ones that will be the most practical for you in your kosher home. So I'm going to unmute everybody now. If there are any questions, come right up with them. And also I want to welcome Tammy here. Tammy, can you hear me? No?
Yep.
Tammy, are you there?
Yep.
Welcome to the class.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anyway, who had their hand up? Was it
Phyllis.
Phyllis.
Yes.
What can I tell you?
Okay, I heard that silverware, if you should mistake it and use it for the wrong meat or dairy, you should put it into soil and leave it for 2 or 3 days.
That's partially true. The easiest way is to just take it, whatever it was, and just re-kosher it, dip it in a pot of boiling water. That's the easiest. An example for what you said is as follows. Let's say that you have what they call hard cheese. Parmesan cheese is an example of hard cheese. And you take a fleischic knife and you cut the cheese with the fleischic knife, okay? All of a sudden now your knife is not fleischic anymore, it's now parv. So that's an example where you take it and you put it into the soil, because what happens is that the knife lost its meat status by putting the pressure on the cheese. You can't put the pressure on by putting it in water. So when you put it in the soil, you like stick it in the soil. It's the rubbing of the ground next to the to the steel. You put the steel next to the dirt rather than putting the steel next to the wheel, whatever that saying goes. That's not used very commonly, but it is used. Also, too, you can use it by, like, let's say you take a milk, you're cutting a salami, a hard salami with a milchik knife. Same thing. You're putting the pressure on the knife. You take that same pressure and you stick it in the dirt. The leaving it for 2-3 days, I'm not familiar with that. I know there probably is a time element, but that would probably vary by whatever the custom is. All right.
Okay.
Any,
Okay, I understand. Okay, what about using milk knife for fruit and then by accident you eat it with flakes? Can that be done?
um,
I was told because it's a cold item that it could be used.
well, a cold item is not, you're not going to change the status. I mean, fruit's parv.
Right.
So you're not going to really change the, I think this is a matter of strictness. The answer is yes. You could cut it with a milchik knife and eat it with the hamburger. It's really not going to be mixing milk with meat, but this is a status that we call machmir, strict. It's not advisable, but it's also too, you're not violating the laws of milk and meat by doing that. The best way is always to go for strictness. This way you're not going to be tempted. You're not going to really make any mistakes. Karina had her hand up.
Yeah, I have a quick question about blood. You mentioned that like we should avoid eating blood. We should not eat blood. And I was curious if that applies to cooked blood as well. And also, I buy ground beef a lot, and I noticed that there's just a lot of blood in ground beef inherently. Like it's tough to get rid of. Not eating blood, would that mean that I'd have to like wash the ground meat, make sure that all the blood gets out before I cook it?
The blood that you see, very good question. Excellent.
Thank you.
The blood that you see in ground beef, or if anybody is from New York, your chopped meat, or in steaks, we have to trust the, let's say that the ground beef was ground by, you bought it at the kosher store. You've got to trust them to the extent that the meat that was used to ground the beef had been koshered already, and that it had been salted and the blood had been drained from it. So anybody will tell you that the blood that you see in the ground beef, or even in the chicken or in other meat, they're going to tell you it's because that the process was done where the blood was drained from the meat initially. It's really not a concern. On the other hand, it is a concern because and they say it's really because it's the residue of the blood that was in the animal. All of that blood was drawn out. That's what makes it kosher. But yet still, even if you take something and you freeze it right away, you're going to maintain something. There'll be some drainage, so to speak. So the answer is yes and no. No, there's not a problem by, when you see that red liquid in there. And some rabbis will tell you, well, that's really not, there's a word for it, which I don't know offhand. But still, if it's in there, that's what I would do. I mean, the meat, the ground beef and all the rest, but you just empty it. You don't want to cook it with that in it. But it doesn't, cooked blood, it doesn't make a difference. If it's there, it's there, whether cooked or uncooked. Which brings up a good question. What about human blood? Now, I'm not talking about vampires. I'm talking about, let's say you're eating something, and I mean, I bite my lip all the time because I eat too fast. And sometimes, like you're biting your lip and then it bleeds, then you eat into an apple, and you've got your blood that's on the apple. Well, what you should do is that if it's seen, if the blood is apparent that it's on the apple, then you should cut off the part of the apple and throw it away because it does not look right. That's Maris ayin, what appears to the eye. But human, they don't account for eating human blood because we're not cannibals. Eleanor, you have a look of concern on your face. Any more questions?
Is that the reason why you can't, I know a lot of butchers or delicatessens, kosher delicatessens won't have rare roast beef.
Well,
They say it has to be without the blood.
well, if the meat is cooked rare, like I say, the blood has already been drawn from the meat. So whether it's rare or well done, I mean, when it's rare, it looks bloody. But you know, the excess that you have there, it's really not a concern. And by the way, let me go back to what I said at the beginning of the class. I forgot to say it today. I am not a rabbi. If you have problems with this, you should consult a rabbi and get the strict law interpretation. I'm not saying I'm not being strict, but like I say, I'm not a rabbi. So a rabbi may tell you something, no, you can't eat that. And if that's how he decides, and that's what you should do. But I think the reason for not having rare roast beef is, once again, Maris eye and what it looks like. Karina, another question. Karina.
Yeah. So my family likes to eat organs a lot. It's just, I guess it's part of the Russian culture.
Why not? Yeah,
I was-
why organs? Why don't they eat pianos? They're much smaller.
That's what I was suggesting. Like,
I'm
it would
sorry.
make more
I'm sorry.
sense.
Yes, they like to eat organs. Okay.
And you mentioned that like the fat that covers organs cannot be eaten. If I were to make something for them with, like, I don't know, liver or whatever, would there be like a special way I would have to clean the liver to like take the fat off, I guess?
Liver,
Like a special
liver is, this is why you do not see fresh liver sold in most kosher stores, because it can contain blood. What you have to do before you serve it, before you cook it, you have to broil it. And broil it really good, because what that will do is that will dry up and take away all the blood. As far as other organs, I don't know where you're gonna get, I don't know, I mean,
Well, what about sweetbreads?
those are brains, aren't they?
Okay.
I don't know. I worked at one place that had those. I don't know. I don't eat brains. I don't.
Okay.
But no, they have to, liver is the only problematical thing. It's got to be broiled before you can cook it.
But that gets rid of the blood, not the fat, right?
Well, yeah, correct. The fat, I mean, you're gonna see, I mean, my mother used to make chicken. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say this. It's already, when we started the class, it was still the Jewish calendar, the third day of Av, which is my mother's yahrzeit. So I wanted to make this class in her memory and as a tribute to her, who she was the one who got me involved in Judaism just by giving me, I'll tell you a good story, by the way, just to transfer that. I grew up in a family that my parents were very moral people, very ethical people, but we did not have much Yiddishkeit. We lit Hanukkah candles and had 2 seders. That was it. But whenever my mother used to get angry at me, which was quite often, she'd go, Isser Shlomo, you're acting bad again. Isser Shlomo is my Hebrew name. Without her saying that, I would never have known what my Hebrew name was. And the Hebrew name, the name that you are given, describes you. That's your essence. That's the rabbis say that's the only time parents really have the gift of prophecy, where by giving you a Hebrew name, those words, that's who you are, that's your essence. So merit of my mother's neshama having Aliyah. Mom, this class is for you.
Amen. Amen.
Anyway, where I interrupted somebody, I'm sorry, who was,
I think it was Karina.
oh, Karina, we were in the middle of a question?
Yeah, we were talking about like, yeah, it's a slightly less interesting topic, but boiling organs would get rid of the blood, but not the fat, was my question. So how would we get rid of the fat?
Well, the fat around the organ is usually going to be. I mean, you just cut it. I mean, I don't know what you've got in mind. I mean, before I became an observant Jew, we had some very close friends who were Greek, and we used to be invited to all their parties. And they used to, when they used to cook a lamb, they cooked everything. They used to put the spleen, the kidney, everything on the spit and eat that. I don't. You would just have to cut off the fat. You would just have to remove whatever fat that you can.
There's no prohibition about eating the fat, is there, other than?
Yes, the fats that were used for sacrifices on animals, and those are the fats that are associated with the organs. We're not supposed to eat those.
Oh.
I mean, like the regular fat you get on pieces of meat, you know, it's not good for your cholesterol, but
That's true.
Okay, thank you.
Adam, you're uncharacteristically quiet.
I have no questions. Karina took all of the questions because I was also thinking, like, when I'm cooking for her family, these organs, like, what am I gonna do? No, I've learned a lot for sure. I don't really have that many questions.
Adam, here's what you do. Just serve a lot of l'chaim before you cook something, and take like chicken tenders and say, yeah, this is the gallbladder here, you know.
You'd think that would work.
Make something simple.
Adam, I would never do it, but I'm not you. You can do whatever you want. But
Listen, unfortunately, I've never met another Russian family that doesn't drink like Karina's. So the l'chaims are kind of out the window. So we'll have to find another route.
Adam, I think you should find. I think you should talk to a rabbi about this, not me. I'll just give you crazy ideas.
I'll bring it up to my LO. What is it? LOR.
Take him out to eat. Take him out to eat. That'll be much more impressive.
That's a better.
I mean, what are you going to feed him? Special canned bananas? That's all you got there anyway. So
that's all I eat. That's all I eat. 3 meals a day.
all right. All right. Any more questions here?
Nope.
Eleanor Lieberman, you got any questions?
Well, just that that question about the blood being there when you purchase the meat, we had it with chickens, and that was considered, actually, they drain the blood, but there is this residue after the process. It's very diluted, but it looks like it's there.
Yeah.
And we asked about that. But
Yeah,
there's
well,
part of this, it reaches a point where it's considered kosher.
well, it is kosher. It's not, but like I say, it has to come. This is the difference between kosher meat and non-kosher meat. If you go by non-kosher meat and you see the blood there, you know that when the animal was slaughtered, the blood was not drained like it is in a kosher slaughter. So you know for a fact that is blood. There's a word for it. Maybe by next week I can find out what that word is. But still, if it was me, if I saw it, I would pour it out before.
Alan, where do the laws of Shechita come from? The details. Because I mean, I don't think the Torah doesn't specify.
No, that would be there's a part of the Talmud which is called Yorah Dera, Yorahdeah, and in that they've got the, and that would be the Mishnah, I believe. And in there, it's got the I believe it's got the details of the Shvita. If it's not there, it would be through the rabbis, because when you think about it, the main thing in Shechita is to keep the animal from suffering and not causing any hardship. So I mean, use a chicken, for example. I don't know if you can do this so much on a cow, but the chicken, the windpipe and the main artery are cut at the same time. So which hastens the death. And I don't know on a cow how the anatomy is set up if it's like that, but yeah, that would be that would be somewhere in the oral law.
Is there just like a seed of that in the Torah though, where they
No.
extrapolate?
No. It's like, you think of it like this. In the Torah, we're commanded to put on tefillin.
Right.
How?
But it
Doesn't tell us.
they should be signs between your eyes, right? I mean, there's that.
Yeah, but I mean, between your eyes can be on you put it at the tip of your nose.
Right.
I mean, it's, we're told when we put on tefillin, it's supposed to come to our hairline. Well, that doesn't say anywhere in the Torah.
Right.
So that's where the oral law comes in. It gives us the detail, and that's where the laws are drawn from the oral Torah, from the Mishnah. That'll be your homework assignment, Fred. Last time we gave you a homework assignment, you came up with another name for
Oh yeah, the blech.
the blech.
I didn't hear the whistle 2 weeks in a row.
We should
Really-
get to that.
I really look forward to that.
Well, I was so, there's usually I find something strange or weird, but all of this stuff is weird. Like when you read all the details, but that's what I stuck mostly to the Chumash. I didn't get, I would have had to wait another week or two before I could gather all that information together. It's so vast. So I did the best I could do. Okay, so anyway, so next week we're going to be talking about why should we keep kosher, and there may be some other surprises. So and next week will probably be the last class, but I will be starting up again probably after the holidays, and I'll let you all know, but I'll see you all next week, God willing.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned the holidays. Is there a day between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that's a very special day? I live in a development where we were having a party on the Thursday before, and they said, well, the Saturday is special. I couldn't figure this out.
There's a fast day.
Is that it?
Well, yeah, it's right before Yom Kippur. It's Tzom Gedalia. That's
Okay, because I looked on the calendar. Usually the Jewish calendar explains all this, and it didn't. So I was just wondering.
yeah, Tzom Gedalia. That's Gedalia. He was a captain, I believe. He was assassinated. He was a Jewish mediator, let's say. I don't know that much about him, but yeah, maybe that's what they're talking about. Or, I mean, like a day you couldn't have a party. Is that what they were saying?
Right.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Fast of Gedalia.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else?
Yeah, Alan, I have a question
Sure.
about, just as you have supervision in order to get a hechsher, on non-meat things, but in a kosher slaughterhouse, Is there anyone who actually supervises, or is the shochet just assumed to be doing everything in a correct way?
Excellent question. That would depend on who is who's doing the agency that supervises the slaughtering. Normally, I would say it does not require supervision. However, there's many companies that, like, for example, when I was working in the meat department of Winn-Dixie, we'd get in the meat, and it would come from Solomon's, it would come from Teva, it would come from all these different Shor Habor, all these different places. They have the slaughterhouses. Now, the slaughterhouse is under the supervision of one of the supervising agencies, and it depends on what their policy is. I would say that I'm not familiar with those policies. So, the shochet themselves, they usually they're supposed to be very holy people who have the, because, it's like the mohel that's doing the bris. You don't want some guy that just, graduated barber college and learned how to do circumcisions. You want somebody that was a bad example, but it's a great question. Like I say, but I think that would depend on the organization itself. My guess would be that they would require that there be a mashgiach there, but I'm not going to hang my hat on it. Ask your rabbi.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right. Well, anyway, since I didn't blow the whistle here, Fred, here I am with wearing the lampshade on my head.
I like the yellow lamps. Are those from your childhood bedroom?
I don't have to tell you that, Fred. No, we inherited those lamps with our house here. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Be good and see you next week.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Alan. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.